Dante, it stands for Digital Audio Network through Ethernet. What is it and why should your church be using it in your AV systems? Well, in a church AV environment, you have a lot of audio and video devices that need to get a signal from one place to another. For example, you have an audio source like a wireless microphone. From here, the audio is sent to the receiver. Then, once it gets to the receiver, it needs to get to the mixing console. Once it gets to the mixing console, it needs to be sent to the speakers in the room for the congregation to hear, or maybe that audio needs to be sent to the other computer that's streaming the feed online. Another example, you're probably using an application like ProPresenter or Proclaim. You might be playing videos or background music from them, and that audio as a source needs to get to destinations like a console in your PA system as well. My point is, in a church AV system, there are a lot of sources and destinations for both audio and video. In this video, I just want to focus on what Dante can do for the audio side of things. Maybe later we'll make a video focused one for Dante. But for now, I want to show you the components that are going to be necessary for setting up a robust Dante network system for your church so that all of these audio source and destinations can be seamlessly integrated, and it can be very convenient if you need to reroute those audio paths without needing to have point-to-point connections that need physical rewiring. Check out the back of our mixing console right here. This is a SQ7 mixing console by Allen and Heath. We highly recommend this console. It's very strong and robust. Notice how few of these analog preamp ports are actually being used on the backs of this console. The console here is primarily being used for the nice hardware interface we have with motorized faders and knobs to control and mix audio. I show you this because times are changing with how you send audio around a system. You'll notice that we have a few key connections here. The first one here is this one cable. This is for the Allen and Heath S-Link stage box. That is a different type of audio over Ethernet protocol, and it's a bit more limited. It's for the Allen and Heath ecosystem of products only. It's great for their stage boxes. We have one here backstage at this church, but it does not have nearly the flexibility that Dante does in getting audio from one place to another. Then on the back of the console right here, you'll see this is the Dante card. And you'll notice it says 64 by 64. And this allows us to send 64 channels in and out of this console over the Dante network. So this is the first thing to understand about Dante, is that the devices you want to put on a Dante network to be a source or destination for Dante need to have a Dante card installed in them. A lot of manufacturers include an option to add a Dante sound card like this one here. Some of the manufacturers like Yamaha ship their consoles with Dante integrated already, and you'll see a little port that's labeled Dante. Here with Allen and Heath, you have an option card for this input-output port that allows you to swap out whichever one you want. In this console, for example, we could put a Waves card, which is another audio over Ethernet protocol. But Dante is the best when it comes to AV integration all around. There are some other great protocols too, but this is going to be the most flexible, especially for small to mid-sized churches who want lots of expandability for their system. So having a Dante card in it that has the chips that can process the audio for Dante, that's one important ingredient for the audio hardware that we're going to be using in this setup. But what about computers? Here we have a Mac Mini that runs our computer graphics for our visuals here at this church, and it often needs to send audio to the sound system. And here we are running Dante Virtual Soundcard. So it's just like the sound card I showed you on the back of the console here, but it's virtual, which means it's all software based. And then Dante is able to use the network interface card or the Ethernet port on this Mac computer. It's able to pull the network connection out the back of that computer and send it to our network switch. And now this computer has a virtual audio interface on the Dante network. Right now we are running 8 in by 8 outs. If we wanted to, we could go all the way up to 64 ins and outs. And this is going to come in handy if you need the ability to do, let's say, a virtual sound check on your computer. If you want to send all of the multi-track audio from your mixing console and your band into a digital audio workstation like Logic or Ableton to be able to record tracks. And then you can play them back from your computer here over multiple channels into the individual channels on your console to do a virtual sound check. We're gonna keep this one at 8x8 just so it's not overkill. And you'll notice too, we actually have some different latency settings here. So it can go as low as 4 milliseconds, which is such a small amount of latency, it is not going to be noticeable to anybody. So Dante Virtual Sound Card, that's the second crucial element of a Dante ecosystem on the software side of it, on all of the machines that you want to be able to send and receive multi-channel audio. Dante Virtual Sound Card, it's not free. It is less than $100. They have a few different pricing options. They have a pro version for really demanding environments. I think that's overkill for most churches. Just get the regular version of it here. Then we have Dante Controller. This is a free app for simply controlling your network and the routing on your system. So I'll dive into this in a minute, but first let's talk about our network setup we have here. Having a robust IT network is going to be crucial for your AV systems, especially when you're running audio or video over IP with Dante. Lately, our favorite setup is to use a Dream Machine Pro router by UniFi. So this is simply a router. It hands out IP addresses to all the devices. And then on the router side here, we can create multiple networks or VLANs for our production setup. I'll show you how that's set up in a minute. Then down here, we have the UDM Pro Max network switch. It is a layer 3 switch. It also has the AV specific settings that you can apply to your different networks and ports on the switch so that it is automatically, conveniently optimized for systems like Dante. Another thing we usually spec standard with the UniFi systems are going to be a access point for Wi-Fi. Sometimes 1 or 2 access points will be needed in a church environment for the worship center. And up here they have a different switch that they're using for their house IT system. I prefer having our AV systems on a completely isolated network with our own hardware as well. That's why we have our own dedicated router in this room as well as our own dedicated switch. So if any changes happen to the rest of the IT network in the building or the campus, it's not going to affect anything here, and we can provide the best support possible from the Churchfront team for our client here. So now let's dive into the UniFi software so I can show you a few tips when it comes to network configuration. If you're going to use UniFi products with Dante, this is what's worked really well for us. So here's the topology of the system here. You can see we have our ISP connection here. We've got our Dream Machine router, and then we've got our first network switch, and then we've got our second one down here. This is in the rack down by the stage. We've got a little network switch here at front of house for some other Dante accessories that I'll show you later. So if I go to the network settings here in UniFi, I have 2 VLANs set up. One is our default network, 192.168.1. That's the subnet for the default network. Subnet meaning what are the first 3 numbers of the IP address, and then the last number is going to be the variable that determines what the devices get assigned their IP address on that network. And then the second one for Dante Audio, the subnet's 192.168.60.0. We've kind of standardized for our installs that we want to assign Dante.60. We just kind of pick that number arbitrarily. Sometimes a separate production control network will be .50. And it's really easy for us when we're looking at devices on a network to see, okay, what subnet is it on? And if there's a mismatch or an issue, we can just kind of know quickly by those numbers that we have in-house kind of created standard for. So if we go to the Dante network here, you'll see I actually disabled auto scale network because I want to dedicate just the first, I believe, 94 IPs. Yeah, right here from .6 to .99. Those are going to be dedicated to DHCP, which means if a device just gets plugged into the network, like what I did with my computer right here, it will be automatically assigned an IP address. But then for any numbers above 100 and up, those are going to be manual IPs that I'm going to assign a manual IP for devices like my mixing console and the wireless microphones. I'll show you that in a moment. It's just important to configure this basic network settings before you get into the Dante configurations. I have it so my VLAN ID is 60. I have isolated network. IGMP snooping is on. Multicast DNS is also on. DHCP mode, so there is a server, and the start is from here to here, from 0.6 to 0.99, and then I have DHCP guarding to protect from any rogue DHCP servers. Anybody else out there who's experienced with UniFi and Dante, leave your feedback down below. I would love to get your feedback on if these are the ideal settings, but after lots of trial and error and a lot of research, that's what has been working well for us in having perfectly stable Dante networks with these installs. So then I'm gonna go back to my UniFi devices. Let's go to my main rack here in my main switch. And then I'm gonna go ahead and filter the view here to show just our Dante audio network. So you'll see on this first switch here, we have 3 devices that are gonna be on the Dante network. So let me click on this port right here. This is actually for this Mac Mini that is running audio from ProPresenter to the sound console. This Mac Mini has 2 Ethernet connections, or network interface cards, NIC for short, has 2 of those connections to the switch. One of them is dedicated to just general internet connection and just controlling things on the production default network. The other NIC, or network interface card, is dedicated to Dante audio. So that's one way you can ensure you have a more robust Dante audio connection, is having a separate network interface card for Dante. So then when I select it here, you'll see that it's on the Dante VLAN down here. I have it as a multicast router port enabled. I also have it blocking any other VLANs, so it's not gonna accept any other VLANs on that port. I also have the Pro AV setting on this port. I've got it selected to be Dante. So what's great with UniFi, this only happened, I think, within the past couple of years, is they've actually integrated Dante compatibility into their pro level switches. I think in the past there was more issues with it, but now it's been working very well for us running this all on UniFi. And there's some other settings down here, but I just kept those on automatic, and that's been working great. So if I go to my client devices, those are all the devices that are clients of the network are plugged into the switch, or you'll see them on Wi-Fi. I actually have it filtered out here to see just my Dante audio devices. So now you can see all of the devices we've got plugged into the network that are on the Dante VLAN. So if I click here, the Cliente, it's interesting why they call it that, but that is our front of house mixing console. And you can see here, it's assigned the manual IP address of 100. So when I went to my SQ Dante card settings here in Dante Controller, that's where I assigned the manual IP address that shows up here on UniFi. But if I were to go to a different computer, like this Mac Mini, the computers like the Mac Minis, I kept them on DHCP, so this has a random IP address of .65. I could change that if I want it to be manual, but I think for computers and things that could conveniently be removed from the network, or if you're plugging or adding one in, I think it's better to have those be on DHCP, so they have an IP lease that's not going to be permanently reserved for them. I know there's a lot of IT experts out there, so again, leave your feedback down below. I always like learning from your comments. So it's important to understand with UniFi, these are managed switches, which means I can go in and I can select a port, and then I can tell it what network I want that port to be on, and I can configure it all manually. Dante also works with simpler switch setups. You could theoretically not even need a switch, and you could daisy chain some Dante devices together. Wouldn't recommend it, because that could easily fail if one of those connections breaks. Dante recommends using a star topology with a basic unmanaged switch, where you have the switch in the middle, and then it's connected to all your devices that are surrounding it that have point-to-point connections with that switch, or use a managed switch, which you'll have to do a little bit more IT configuration here on the back end. I plan on adding much more training on this to the churchfront.com course library, so it's a good reason to become a Churchfront Premium member. You'll have access to that when that comes out later this year, but IT can get pretty involved, but what's good about Dante is you can use a simple unmanaged switch where it's gonna be plug and play. You just wanna make sure it's a switch that does not have the EEE feature on it. It's like an efficiency feature that can really mess up Dante. You just want a basic unmanaged switch. In Dante, on the Audinate website, the company who makes Dante, they have recommendations for switches. But if you're gonna go the managed switch route, you can get switches from Netgear or Cisco, but my favorite is UniFi, because what I love about UniFi is you don't really have to be an IT expert to understand the UI. They did a really good job at making this easy to configure and to understand, especially if you're new to IT. When it comes to cabling for your Dante network, you have to use Cat5e or better. We're using Cat6, shielded Cat6, or Cat6a in pretty much all of our installs. So I'd recommend Cat6, could be unshielded, or make sure it's plenum if it's going through a plenum area. But Cat6 is a good standard cable to use. Now it's time for the fun part where we get to dive into Dante Controller so you can see how this all works. So if I go here into Controller in the routing view, you're gonna see all of our Dante transmitter devices and our receiver devices. And sometimes the same device can be both a transmitter and a receiver. So here's our SQ7. As you'll see, it's got 64 channels to transmit from it, and it also can receive up to 64 channels. So you'll notice we're actually not really transmitting much from the SQ. If you had a amplifier and PA system that was Dante enabled, that's where you'd be sending audio out of the SQ to that amp or the PA system. But here, we're primarily using Dante to send audio from our Shure ULXD 4Q microphones. You can see we have 2 body packs, 2 handhelds. They are routed into channels 1, 2, 3, and 4 on our mixing console here. What's really great about Dante is to enable these connections. You simply find the right intersection here between your transmit and your receiver, and then you click the little checkbox. I just disabled that subscription, so now the audio would not work from that mic. Then I click on it, it loads a second, and now it is subscribed. So now that connection is made. Let's take a look at another example of this. If I go to the Mac CG, that's this computer right here, and that is Dante Virtual Soundcard on this Mac. It's running right now. It's like a virtual audio interface. It's sending audio out of this computer. I'm just playing some music from YouTube right now. And if I were to go to the transmit of that and I went to my SQ, we're gonna see that it's transmitting channels 1 and 2 out of Dante Virtual Soundcard into channels 9 and 10 on the inputs for the SQ. So if I go to the device info, let me click on the Mac CG device here. And if I go to the transmit page, you can see the green signal icons light up. This is one great thing about Controller, is I can actually see if audio is coming through or not. If I were to go ahead and pause the YouTube video, now the signal went away. Now if I go ahead and play it again for audio to run through, now the signal comes back. So it is important to understand when you're in Controller, you can click on individual devices. So let's say I go back into the device settings for my Mac, and I can go over to the channels, both receive and transmit. I can double click on them and I can rename the channels and label them. And then I can also go to the device config setting. I can rename this device on the Dante network, and then I can go to network config here. And this one is actually, because it's a computer running virtual sound card, the IP address settings are gonna have to be changed at the computer network settings, not here in Controller. If I go to device config right here, I can also change the sample rate. Your Dante devices do need to be running the same audio sample rate in order for everything to work properly. So if something's not working, make sure you do double check sample rates with your Dante devices. But let's go to a different device that's gonna work a little bit differently on the configuration. So if I go to my Allen & Heath SQ7, you can see we have all of the channels labeled here, and then I can go, and again, if I play some audio, and if I go down to the computer channels, you can see that audio is coming in the receive channels here on the SQ7 here when I play them from YouTube on the computer. And remember, all of this is happening over a simple network. There's not analog cables going anywhere from the computer to the console. The data goes to the network switch and then it gets sent to the appropriate devices. If I go to the network config here for the Dante card in the SQ, this is where I would apply the manual IP address to that device in here. So I can select it and I can enter in the IP address. So it's gonna be manual, and that address is always dedicated to the console. You can see I could put it on IP address automatically. So DHCP servers can hand out that address automatically. But again, for more mission critical devices, like the audio devices, I like to do it in manual. Let's see if I go to my ULXDs, if I go to network config, same thing here. I can manually configure the IP address on these devices from here. So it's going to be different with some of these devices, whether you configure it from the software computer end or from the hardware device end. When you're in the device info view here on Dante, this is one of the best places to make sure everything's functioning properly. First of all, I make sure there's nothing that's showing up red or any status indicators that's showing there's an error somewhere. I also like to look at the primary address, make sure that it's getting all the right IP addresses here, that it has the right subnet. You can see these are all having the subnet with .60 here, so it's on the right VLAN. I can also confirm they're getting the primary link speeds that they need. Dante AVIO devices are capped at 100 megabits per second. Because they have fewer channels, they don't need as much bandwidth. But then our mixing console and computers should all be 1 gigabit per second for more channels and lots more bandwidth. If there's something wrong here, if you see a status light or an indication, Dante is not happy, because there's probably a network issue going on where maybe something's not configured properly with your router, in your VLANs, in your port settings. So it's very important to get all those things set up properly if you're using UniFi or other network systems, so that it doesn't mess up Dante in sending and transmitting data. Also, you have the clock status here. So the clock is what helps keep everything in sync, and we're using our front of house console as the primary preferred leader for syncing up all of the audio. Up next, I want to show you some very convenient products UniFi makes. These are the Dante AVIO adapters. And what's cool about these is you can actually send Bluetooth to this device, which then sends audio to your mixing console. So this is very convenient if someone comes in the church and they just want to play music from Spotify or their phone for a rehearsal or just for some sort of event. They can just stream it over Bluetooth to this device. It has a very easy pairing feature right here, and then it will send audio to the console. Another great AVIO adapter is the 2-channel USB-C adapter for 2 channels in and out. And this you can just plug into USB-C to a phone jack or to a computer device. And once again, have quick audio connection to the Dante network. You can send it to your mixing console or any other destination. So I highly recommend these. They're about, I think, $160 a piece, but very convenient products. I hope you guys found this video helpful and you have a better understanding of the capability of Dante audio for your church. There's so much more it can do. We didn't even get into the video side of things. We don't often integrate that quite as much at Churchfront. I hope to use that in the future more often or try it out. The thing about the video is the encoders and decoders for video can get pretty expensive, but it would have all the same routing capability as the audio side of it. Feel free to reach out to us at Churchfront if you would like help building one of these systems at your church. We'd be glad to help you out, or join Churchfront Premium to learn more about these solutions. Thanks for watching. Hit the like. See you next time.